All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's Game Changer session. We have the folks joining us are all internal, so we're doing a little more of a roundtable setup for our topic on Disagree Agreeably today. A few quick announcements before we get to that. Real quick, as I mentioned in one of my emails, we'll have a newsletter with a whole bunch of stuff on the fiscal year getting kicked off. That'll be out to the team very soon. I've just got a lot of things that need to go in there. So when you get that one, grab a cup of coffee and block some time, because I write a lot anyway, and this is going to be a long one. So be ready. But that's because there's so many exciting things coming up. Also, coming up in the next really 60 days will be our trainer individual development plans, which what this will look like is we'll have a document out to you in advance to kind of plan some of the things that we want to talk about. Pretty much, what do you want to accomplish here in your career at Dale Carnegie? What goals do you have coming up? Some things that be good for me to know as I'm working with you and helping you out on that. And then you and I'll schedule a time at some point to get together, talk through it, make sure that I'm clear, give you any specific insight into what's happening over the course of the year that you might be interested in. So that'll be good to have, and my aim is to have all of those wrapped up by the end of October. So see something very soon on that. Also, I have a date for you and for all of us. Mark, you already know this date. The Delivery Council picked a date for a date. Mark on your calendar. A date for our Dale Carnegie course innovation meeting. So kind of what we're doing in place of our fall refreshers. We're looking at Saturday, October 27th, Saturday before Halloween. I don't have a time set in stone yet, but we're thinking something like 9 to 3. It won't be a full day. We might not even go that late, but we do have some things that I think are going to be really important for us to cover, and I think will help a lot of us just get clear. One of the topics we're going to talk about is vision posters, partly to decide whether this is something we want to make part of how we do the Dale Carnegie course here in Chicago, and if it is, how do we do it? What does it look like? So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and together as a team figure out how we're going to make it work. We also want to talk through the ROI project and make sure we know what resources we have for that, what the expectations are on that, and get your ideas on how we can make that better. Probably the bulk of our time will be spent on one of our key initiatives this year, which is course coaching. The Delivery Council had a great conversation on coaching. We did a little reminiscing about some of the excellent coaching experiences that we've had in the past. Some folks on the Delivery Council started as course coaches and developed into, actually pretty much everybody on the Delivery Council, I guess, did, and developed into, well, folks that are highly regarded trainers today. So it's an important part of what we do, and we think right now we got some things to do to make it better. Part of that's on the back end, operationally, what can we do to have trainers have better access to the coaching list, things like that. And part of it is how do we make an experience in the Dale Carnegie course more worthwhile for our coaches. And that's something we just haven't done training on that in a while, and it would be good for everyone to get on the same page. So that'll be a big part of that day. So go ahead and block your calendar, October 27th here at 1333. We'll have more out on that soon. We'll also have dates for the other innovation meetings that are coming up this fall. And with that, again, keep an eye out for that newsletter. Otherwise, I'm going to dive into today's topic, which is one that Mark and I were just talking about how in today's world it seems like a lot of Dale Carnegie stuff more relevant than ever, and it's how do we disagree more agreeably? It's a tool we teach certainly in the Dale Carnegie course, and it shows up in our leadership programs, and it shows up in seminars, and it shows up in a lot of in-houses. This is a program that we take and we use in so many, or a tool that we take and we use in so many different ways. And as powerful as it is, it can also be very complicated to set up well, to get people to wrap their head around it, to practice it the right way, and to walk away from the session really feeling like they know it. And so what we've done is we've invited Mark to be our guest host today to kind of guide us through a conversation on what we can do so that that is more consistently a high point of our training, and that people walk out of there more diplomatic and more tactful when disagreements come up. because again, today's world, it makes a big difference. So Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on disagree agreeably?
All righty. As you were saying, today's a time where people are supposed to be offended, supposed to be emotional, supposed to, if you look at social media, come at each other with claws. And yet it's not very productive in our home relationships, our work meetings, or anyplace else. And so I think we can set up this weeks earlier, because if you think of the first part of this, how do you come up with real evidence in a world where it's like, you're an idiot and that's what I think? It is a comment. So like last night I did session 3, which in the 12-week we're getting earned, you're excited, and the magic formula. In coaching their achievement talks, I made points about, see, you've lived this thing, setting up earned, eager, excited. The more we do that before we get to disagree agreeably, the more people are going to realize my actual experience is the evidence I always have. Because in a lot of disagree agreeably, where it's in essence an impromptu experience, your experiences are it. Your education that might provide, or research that might provide statistics and other types of things, is certainly valid. And I'm a huge fan of, like, you give them a magic formula or example, and then you hit them with a statistic. So you got both the emotionally based person and you got the numbers based person in the meeting to go, oh, I get the point. So the first part of the setup is before you even get to the session.
Would you even say that, like, in the 8-week program, we're going to do this in 6, right?
Yes.
5 weeks.
Five.
So in
Yeah.
session 5, thank you.
Thank you.
By the time they get here, they've been through 4 sessions where they've heard probably each person share 3 or 4, maybe 5 stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because by the time you get here, one of the points you can make is how many perspectives have you thought differently about now from hearing people's stories, not their soapboxes,
Right,
but their stories and their evidence.
right.
So we've done a lot of work setting up this session already in the course.
And we built the idea that 30 to 90 seconds, I don't know, I think most of us do this, 30 to 90 seconds is average attention span, so we're going to be able to do stuff under 2 minutes, down 35, 45 seconds. Clear, specific evidence and a point. So when they get to this, even though they don't have the think on your feet segment in the 8-week that you've got in a 12-week, you don't need that because they've just been speaking from their life experience for 4 weeks or 2 days or whatever it is, depending on the format. So we're selling this concept before we ever get there. When we get to the actual session, in the setup, the manuals talk about having them bring in an example of some topic they have a feeling about that we'll use as kind of fodder for the process. I found a lot of times you'll have a topic and not much evidence. So I tend to go with giving them a couple of the preset ones that are recommended, smartphones in meetings, or is email a waste of time or not, because they have to have had experience with that. Even though something up in the course, they did it online or whatever they call us. And so that's just my own take, is I want more control of the topic. So that's seemingly gets people more comfortable when we get to the 3-person, let's practice and do it. So I think what I'd like to hear from people is, what are some of the areas you'd like to have more effectiveness in, or you think you got something really useful, so we can exchange ideas kind of in that whole process, from assigning it the week before, laying it out that week, demoing the body language, the whole 9 yards as we go through. So are there any particular things we want to go after as we start up?
There is you just touched on it, is talking more about the evidence in your personal experiences, how to use it and put that in, because statistics, testimonials, all the other areas of defeats, I can explain clearly. Using their own personal experiences and evidence and verbiage to go with that would be helpful.
Would that fall under, like, if you're thinking about defeats, fall under examples
Mhm.
in your mind? That's
Yeah.
what I would do.
And here's the thing, that's why I made my opening what it was. If they don't get that sense of when I'm on my experience, I'm on solid ground because I lived it, they're missing a central theme of credibility in the Carnegie course that builds their confidence. So you will have sold it multiple times in any of our formats. Specific example, earned, eager, excited is really what it is. And so selling that all the way through, and remember, when I say selling, it's Carnegie selling. We are solving problems. We're not pitching something. Is really how you get to that experience piece. And especially, now the 8-week doesn't have achievement talk, if I remember correctly, right? Okay. But you've got plenty of like HR examples and so on and so forth. By that point, at least 2, I believe. Yeah. Okay. And so really letting people see that their experience gives them ability in front of a room that's essentially bulletproof. Because how can somebody challenge you on something you lived and just brought to life in front of them?
Right,
Much harder.
right.
I think one of the, especially when you're setting up that example at the beginning that you're talking about, one trap I've fallen into is I've given an example of something where there really is a right and a wrong answer, or at least the audience's perception is that there's a clear right or a clear wrong answer, right? So it's not an opinion thing, it's more how do you convince people with evidence, right? And that's actually less useful here. The setup, we want something to be where there are really multiple sides, and there are multiple opinions. And we're trying to get people to see our side and our perspective. Like the one I like, and I set it up this way because I know which way most of the audience is going to feel. But I use the outlawing of smoking in Chicago, and because most people these days are all excited about that particular topic because they don't have to walk into restaurants and walk out smelling like smoke and all this other stuff. So I know what side, especially if I'm downtown, I know what side the audience tends to be on. And so whenever I make that claim or state that opinion up front, I know I've already created a situation where most of them disagree with me. But then I support it with a story that isn't going to convince them differently, but it's going to get them to think about one additional perspective on the issue. That it's not just about me, it's about, well, what are some other ways that this happens? So my point is, especially when we're setting the example, make sure that it's, whatever the topic is, it's one that's an opinion one, where they really would be open to at least hearing the other side, versus one where people are clearly dead set one way. It's just going to be harder to get them around with the tools for if we do that.
Can you share, what does that look like? What does it sound like in that example with the smoking?
Yeah, so I might, and I do it with like a right and wrong way, kind of lead in. So I might say, I usually have someone from the audience, I say, volunteer, real easy, someone raises their hand. I say, all you have to do is say one line. Say, Dan, what do you think about the smoking ban in the city of Chicago? Right, so then I say, okay, go ahead, say your line, and they say it. And I do the wrong way, and I say, that is such a stupid idea, I can't believe it, it's a free country, and it's going like a 30-second line. And then I say, okay, say your line again, right, so they do again. And I say, I see how that can, certainly be a popular opinion today. Let me tell you about my Uncle John. And then I tell them a story about Uncle John, who later on I tell them I make this story up, by the way. I tell a story about my Uncle John, who had always wanted to open up a restaurant in Chicago, kind of a corner cigar shop. Right, he always wanted to do that. Finally saved up his whole life. Finally opened it up. And he had all these regulars, and business was booming. And then the smoking ban came along, and his place didn't qualify to allow people still inside to smoke. And so all of his regulars started going to other places that did qualify. And John lost his business, even though he owned the place, he bought the place, it was his, and the ban made it impossible for him to do business. So he closed up shop. Right. So then at the end, I will tell them that's a fake story, but I say, but did it get you to think differently about the subject? Right? I didn't convince you that people need to be smoking inside, but I maybe got you to think, what are the exceptions to the rule?
Well, and how do government regulations affect businesses? They keep talking about they want jobs in the city. Well, that might be one reason.
Sure, right? But I want to make the point early on that because I don't want them to think we're trying to defend a factual or conduct a factual argument. That's actually not really what this
Yeah,
is
it's
for.
to get the other point of view heard, so there's a chance of understanding. And one way I come at that is, and if you think about it, in a lot of team situations, at work, or even in our home life, we've got people around the table with different opinions. Our goal is to move things forward, figure things out, get progress. And thus, unless we have our point heard, it's unlikely we can do that. And I use the first space shuttle blowing up example early in the program, that if we cannot stand our ground effectively when we have a differing point of view, I mean, literally this comes in at like session 2, we may let down our team, and it may go in the wrong direction. And of course, in an engineering environment, I mean, I've all heard that example somewhere in one of their engineering classes, but you know, most people are still aware of that first blow up, right? And so another way I come at the idea of getting the evidence piece in place is, you know, when you do the two speaking at once thing, what I typically do there is everybody that loves Android over on this side, everybody that loves their iPhone on this side, and it often breaks up pretty even. Now think of a reason you really like that version of smartphone. Okay, everybody on this side stand up, everybody on this side stand up. Tell the other side your reason. Because in the manual it just says, I like Mac, I love, you know. Well, okay, when you hear your actual reason buried alive in a bunch of to me that models what goes on when either we don't speak up effectively or we don't speak up.
Do you conduct that like everybody at once, or do you do pairs? Everybody
Utter pandemonium. And I mean if I got 14 here and 6 here, well then I'll say, okay, I'm deputizing. You know, have
the other side.
Yeah, if you've only got 2 iPhone users or 2 Android users, you gotta throw some course coaches.
Yeah.
But the point is, you're so frustrated, and people have quite a passion about their phones. It's fun.
It's interesting. Okay, 2 things. One, I like that a lot about the smoking in the restaurant, because it's showing that you're not trying to, this is not a place where you're trying to convince someone of something. You're trying to have them see your point of view maybe from another angle, as far as, so they can keep an open mind, so the wall doesn't go up, so they don't get defensive. So we're keeping the lines of communication open in order to move things forward.
More often, we're going to maybe reach consensus or negotiate as a result of this. We're not often going to convince somebody of a completely different.
Right, and that's not even the objective. So I like that part. And then the second thing is,
Getting ourselves heard is the way I explain it. Doesn't mean we convince. And that'll depend on how good our evidence is. To a great extent.
And so we want to make sure that it's an opportunity for us to share in a structured way.
And without raising more offense on the other side. Because today is the world of, I heard a phrase the other day, offendinistas. What can I be offended about today?
Never heard that. And I
heard that and I just broke out laughing.
And I've never heard your comment in the original opening about people are geared towards being offended. I've just never heard that. I guess to each his own. Okay, getting back to the point is, I think as far as the opening goes, I used to do 2 speaking at once. I've done the Mac thing. I've done other things. But the thing I did the last time, Keely does too, I think, and it has worked great. It's a different take on it. It's the restaurant, yes, but yes, and activity.
Well, that I've not seen. I've seen it written up.
It's not like loud and crazy. It was a good setup when I just did it this last time in July, so that you're frustrated with communication, because I assume in some environments there's yelling at things, but a lot of the companies I've been dealing with are frustrated. They can't get their point across. And so it's a quick, easy, exercise about how to move things forward, which is changing a little shift is how I put it. And the words are important, but it's also about the shift and how we think about things. So, Kaylee, what comments do you have on that?
Well, how's it go? Because I've literally not seen it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you got it. See.
Okay, so basically, you can go into as much, we're going to have a great activity. So, it's the warm up. So I keep things in the spirit of the warm up. And we're going to each have the opportunity to have our own restaurants. And there is no budget. You can have anything that you want. You can have it set up anyway. You're going to partner up with someone in a moment, and it's just going to be the two of you. So then everybody finds a partner. I do step by step. And then they're all partnered up. Usually I'll have them partner up before I even start talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use an example. I call a coach up and do an example and say, okay, I want a Mexican restaurant. And it's going to be great. And all these wonderful things. And I'll go through a couple. And then the only responsibility of the other person is to say, yes, but, and then give their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can offer a suggestion. And then when it comes back to
Something
me,
that differs from the point of view.
sure.
Okay.
And then I say, yes, but I really don't think alcohol is going to be great. It's costly. It's expensive. I really think we should also have Chinese as part of the Mexican restaurant. And then the other person says, yes, but it would get confusing, and then it would go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And for about 2 minutes. Maybe it's even a minute.
I do 30 seconds.
Oh, even a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I like to get the point. And then we go, okay, we're going to do the same activity. It can be the same restaurant, it can be a different restaurant. And the only difference is going to be every time the person says something, you're going to be saying yes and add to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to, after you have your opportunity, you give me something new. And then I say yes and we go back and forth. And then let's see how that goes. And we'll talk about it after we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And then they do it. And then it's always been wonderful whenever I've done it, because then, so how did they go? Oh, that was great. We have this wonderful restaurant. We're going to partner up together, and the excitement builds. And what was the difference that we saw when we did this versus this? We debrief, and then it's a good leading conversation I have found to go into Disagree Agreeably. Okay, what was it different? Wow, we were on the same page. We're moving forward. I heard what the person said. The momentum builds. And wouldn't we like to see that when we run into difficult conversations where we need to blah, 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 bridge, which has always been the thing I think of Dan is bridge into the next thing that's
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly how I do it.
So
But
it gives,
minimize.
so it gives them the experience of why the appropriate bridge makes a difference compared to the one that everybody normally uses.
And they can feel it.
It's a good sell on the Christian piece particularly, but also on big picture, not having it be who's right, who's wrong, us versus them, but having it be a collaborative conversation.
Right. It helps them see what's the benefit. They don't know what we're getting into yet. They don't know that and is actually a cushion or part of the cushion and things like that. But they start to see, oh yeah, the second way we were much more collaborative and we got farther. We actually came up with an idea and we asked them, so which way do we usually experience in our workplace? The but one, and then it helps us sell it
Right.
that much better.
Well, and but is an absolutely normal word when we change direction in a thought. We use it all the time. We'll continue to use it. In this particular situation, removing it helps things get better. Because, and that's one reason why I tell people the cushion should be short. The longer you go on with your cushion, the more your brain's going to want to say but, because you're going to turn a corner. If the cushion's really short and neutral, I think people are less likely to use butter, however.
So that makes a different point. I think what the yes and exercise misses out on is the power of evidence versus opinion for the soapbox. But I like how that makes a very obvious point about the power of our reaction in those moments.
Our choice of reaction.
And one other thing about that for me is it's easy to tie it into the Dale Carnegie course in general. It's easy to tie into people's personal lives, and I'm always looking to push the business relevance.
Right.
So getting to Kaylee's comment about collaboration and certain words and strategic and business words. So when we're in the situation at work, can we see how this would be better collaborated? So for me, I don't know, it just seems like it's a natural fit to go into the business direction rather than PC versus Mac.
Yeah. I mean, it's the green light, red light thinking conversation that we have in the LTM. Yes, and is a green light tool build off of what do we call that? The idea. Yeah,
Fluency.
Yeah, idea fluency. Yeah. Whereas yes, but can be useful, but it's red light thinking. It needs to happen after the green light.
I forgot about that. That's good.
Yeah, that's interesting. All this stuff ties to.
I love it.
But yeah, I think we need to make both of those points along the way. I think we could mix it up a bunch of different ways, but we need to make both of those points along the way. Yes, and fits beautifully here, but we also don't want to shortchange the power of the evidence. And I find that can be a challenge whenever we're pressed for time, and when the rest of our exercise, typically, at least how we do it, at least how I've done it, causes them to kind of make up evidence. You know what I mean? Which is just, it's fake by nature. And so I always worry that if I don't get to something that really demonstrates the power of that evidence in the session, that they miss that part, and all they get is the cushion tool, which is not a bad thing to have.
Well, that's
skipping out on the evidence is a challenge.
And I'll tell you one way I do the evidence when I have now this is kind of, I think, perhaps potentially risky, but I do my first session and put a whole raft of testimonials out. And I put it back out again, like in the 12-week, I'll actually do the ROI the second week, especially if I have a big class. And so there's all kinds of evidence on the table, testimonials from students and business people, blah, 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 blah. So if I've got a class where we're already seeing good return on investment examples, because this is typically occurring after the midpoint in a 12-week, I think it's after the midpoint. 8-week?
Midpoint evaluation, sometimes we do in like on break in session 5.
Oh, okay. Well, then this may or may not be applicable, but if you've got people coming in with good solid evidence, I'll do the example with literally, okay, kind of like you're saying, okay, I need you to stand up and tell me that you checked into the Carnegie course and really feel it's a waste of time and money. And then I'll rebut that using all the tools and a specific testimonial that's laying on the table that I've observed. And then I'll challenge them in their small groups to talk about their own experiences using stuff. So even in an 8-week, they've had enough experiences that they've probably solved some problems and saved some time. Now again, you better know your people and you better know results and all of that. And I don't do it currently. I'm using some of the other topics because it's not as clear in the college classes, not yet. People wind up saving time and all of that. They get jobs and everything, but it's not like the class for business people. So that's one way where it's a very clear, specific, okay, there's the testimonial. I saw this person change, and blah, 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 right? Or I talk about, back when I was selling full time, some specific things that made a difference for a company and so on.
I'm confused as to, because the SEM is just a warm up, and so then we go into evidence as we're describing the disagree agreeably.
Sure.
When you were saying that is, I get it for the cushion, that you could be missing an opportunity to use the evidence. I'm not grasping that as far as, are you referring to, like, let's say you did PC or the phones, iPhone versus Samsung. Yeah. Are you saying that when he does that, and then he says, like, I like my iPhone because it's so easy to use and applicable. Is that what you mean? Because
no, because that exercise will get you kind of the same result. That one's actually more about being heard. Right. Is what that point is. What I'm saying is to get people to see the difference between a pure opinion statement, which is a lot of what we can see on Facebook and a lot of what happens in meetings, versus a story that is used as evidence. And to see the difference in those two approaches. Because otherwise what happens is they'll cushion beautifully, But then they say, my evidence is, I think that.
Oh,
Right?
well, then let's take it the next step then,
Mhm.
because maybe that'll clear up what it
Okay.
is. Okay, so, and my timing on this for all of you out there, my timing has been great, so it's not been an issue. I was worried about it, but then I say that because I learned it from Kaylee, is observing her program and watching and things like that. So, plug for observing other people's programs is then we do, go ahead, and can you share about the impromptu on the cards?
Yeah, so I know we don't do, there's not an official session, I think, on your feet, but and I learned this from Holly. So
Holly,
This is part of the reason
Yeah,
we do these
exactly.
things. We have a lot of smart people.
oh, and I love this. It really drives home the point of that.
So before we even get into talking about actual questions and stuff, it's kind of like breaking down the process of the agreeably process, which I think we're supposed to do anyway, but really making it clear. And this is
You
what
teach the speak part first.
This
Right.
is the speak part.
Right.
So
That's why
in the past, I think this is the part where they get really used to hearing and using evidence and speaking it the right way as far as the tool goes. And in the past, this is where I've struggled with in getting them to really understand it and say it correctly. So what we do now, and this worked with 21 people in my class,
21
20
people
hers.
during the day, it worked too.
In the evening, I did it in an evening one, is everyone, we're kind of like in a horseshoe, and everyone has a note card with a different, like, neutral topic on it, kind of like the smartphones and meetings type topics, something related to work.
Benefits of work from home.
Yeah,
et cetera.
and so everyone has that, and then everyone has, I do playing cards, so each person has a playing card, but there's 2 people that have an ace, and 2 people who have a 2, and 2 people who have a 3, all the way up to whatever you need to do. And the first 2 aces, one of them, I say, one person, yell what your topic is on your note card, and they'll say, working from home. And then the other ace has to respond with what they think and what their evidence is. And so I have it on the board, and so they get 5 seconds. They have to stand up, 5 seconds to think about, right, what do I think about it? What's my evidence? And then they have to speak it the way that we're teaching, starting with their evidence.
So
And
not tipping their hand yes or no, it's right into the example.
Right.
So the person has to listen to see which direction it's going.
Yep.
Okay.
so they respond with their evidence, and especially in the first few, they automatically want to say, well, I think blah, blah, blah. And we say, no, start over. We're not hearing your opinion yet. Start with your evidence. And so then they do that, and then they come up with a story, mostly an example, like what we've been talking about, and then they end with stating their opinion. And so everyone, and then they yell out their topic, and the other ace stands up and does the same thing, and everyone has a chance to do that individually and get coached on it.
Okay, where did the topics come from again? They brought in one? Or you
No,
have these cards?
that's one.
We
Those
came up
ones
with
are
our
come up with. They're like they can be in the back of the manual.
But they get individual coaching on that.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so you've really built in the think good exercise into this piece.
Yes, and I'm sure because Holly's done the 12-week or his experience did, so that's probably where it came from.
So they get really good at that. And then I can introduce cushions and say, here's the next step of this.
Right.
And now we're actually going to go back and forth, which I know we haven't really gotten into yet. But
Good. I like that, because that's the hardest part, in my opinion, is leading with that story. And so being able to get one-on-one coaching in there to do it is good.
Huge.
It does take more time. You have to adjust for it when you do it ahead of time. And since I saw hers, and I looked at my watch, and I sat in on that session, and I knew it was going to take longer. I just needed to adjust before, but it was really worth it, because that is where I had struggled. Let's say the time before that, if you don't do that, or when I didn't do that, and then we went and explained it, that's when you get sometimes the questioning looks on their face when they're in the groups of 3. And you can tell you missed it because missed the mark. So this makes it super clear. It's like a next step. So the yes and, then the let's call it impromptu before getting to the.
can I give them an example? Like I demonstrate it before they all have to do it. And then we get into the next part. And before I get them in groups, I have the coaches demonstrate the whole process.
And I like that better, because this graphic here, which I think is going to be in the 8 week, this is out of the 12
Yeah.
week new one. We speak, my evidence is, that could go so wrong with a tone of voice.
Oh, really?
Well, my evidence.
Yeah.
And so giving them that model of begin with the example, don't tip your hand about your direction, make your point, da, 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 that could set this up much more powerfully. And one other thing I add is, and if what you've got is a complaint or a shortfall, you finish with your suggestion of a solution. Because in the corporate world, if all you do is point out problems, you're not nearly as valuable as the person who finds problems and has suggestions for solutions. Which you probably are doing that. I'm just saying that's a piece to add at the end of that to see that I'm going, well, I've already got the earlier stuff. Because that's a lot of what I do in the Think on Your Feet piece in the 12 week is get them where, and I love it because you get down to 35, 40 seconds where it's specific example on target. Yep. So that sets it up. But doing that is probably well worthwhile, particularly if we're going to do the triad thing. That can go fairly quickly if you subject quickly.
Yeah, if they've seen what the coaching looks like, then they can help each other out. My challenge is always they don't even know what the coaching looks like. They've seen one course coach get coached, and that wasn't enough. Yeah, that helps.
I love that.
And one other thing I wanted to ask everybody about, and I find that this isn't emphasized as much, is that second piece of the speak, the connector. It's the bridge, honestly. So what's my evidence? And then that second thing, the evidence shows me that. The evidence it says indicates, I think, but right. So what the evidence tells me. I mean, do we talk about that in the program? Do they use it? What have you noticed?
In that exercise, I try to coach them on it. So they're talking, they're saying it, but I don't know that I go into more explanation of why it's important to have that piece versus just having your example and stating your opinion.
So what would we say? Why do we think that's important? Because there's a specific thing I'm fishing for, but there might be more.
Right.
Why would you say that?
Well, an example can make multiple points. You pick your example for a particular reason.
Yeah.
So when you finish your piece of evidence, which again, it could be 30 seconds, all you need, if it's crisp, you've got to define which point you're making clearly. And I mean, some of the older stuff was, therefore I think, or this shows, or, just, so a couple of words make it clear. Or if you're coming up with a solution for a problem you've just identified, the other person maybe missed or whatever, then it's, so the solution I recommend. So it's a couple of words that defines what your point is from the example, because examples will have multiple points depending on the person listening.
It's a bit of a summary, like the one sentence summary of what you just said. But here's the thing I think we missed that really makes this transition phrase valuable for our opinion is by stating it this way, we depersonalize it. By first, here's my evidence, and by saying the long version, as I've examined this evidence, what it has shown me is, right? So it's about the evidence, right? And so that transition phrase, again, I don't know that we need to go into a ton of depth in the program on this, but I don't want them to skip that piece because it points us back to the evidence and to the story. Whereas I think if we skip that, if I just tell, and my Uncle John's business got closed up, so I think we need to make this change, right? And it's back to me. Versus, and so what that story really shows me is that there's unintended consequences sometimes of regulations. So my opinion is we need to make this change. It's strange, but I think it helps us depersonalize, detach, and keep it about the subject.
It reduces some of the defensiveness, because personal attack has gotten so much the style in our general conversation and media stuff today. It's ludicrous. Read any blog and then go down 3 or 4 comments, and there's somebody, they're clearly not thinking, but they're going to feel better if they can make this person look bad.
There's also someone that makes $20,000 a week doing this really simple thing on money. That's a different comment.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Okay,
What were you going to say?
so,
I don't need money anymore. It's a ton of fun.
I do like that because I don't think I put it about the evidence. I think I use it as evidence, and then most of the times it may say shows me, or therefore I believe, or my opinion is. But I like to put it. So, for instance, like one sometimes an example I've used because I read the study. If you want to do something with a personal example, was I read a study about Oberweis and the most popular ice cream flavor. So if you're having a party, I'm just adding what kind of flavor. The most popular ice cream flavor is vanilla. And I'll start with the evidence is Oberweis sells 3 times as much vanilla than any other flavor in whatever.
Yeah.
Therefore, I believe we should buy vanilla. But how can you use that and use what you were just saying?
So what it shows me is that a majority of the people out there, when they go into Oberweis, they're going to walk out with vanilla ice cream. So most people like it. So I think we should get vanilla for the party.
Or even different.
It's not a world of difference, but it's simply
it focus on there.
Yeah, it's about the evidence. So the evidence tells me here's how I'm debating this. It also leaves a little room, and sometimes this isn't what we want, but it also leaves a little room for the other person to say, well, when I look at the evidence, here's what I think, which is still okay because we're still talking about the evidence, right? They're not talking about our opinion. They're talking about our interpretation of the evidence.
Okay, I like that.
It lessens the chance of the standard personal attack that's become so stylish.
So
That's good.
it's not just a passing segment in that tool. I think it's there for
No, that's actually central.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like why we don't tip our hand, you know. The evidence tells me, you know, just this is so counter culture for people today. It's kind of funny.
Well, I think the other point, I could probably make this too, and I made it in my last time, is we say this is very backwards from the way we've been taught growing up. Like even in school, you're writing a paper and they tell you to start with your opinion or your statement, and then the rest of the paper is all your evidence defending it. Yeah. So this is switching it, like it's completely backwards, which is why it's a little bit challenging to process in our brains, but here's the benefit of everything.
Well, look at business writing. Tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. Why do people wind up wanting to put a summary in their action benefit statement? Because it's been hammered into them since grade school. Well, guess what? If you just gave me a powerful example, I don't need a summary. It was 4 seconds ago. Now give me your one. And same thing here. We're going to define out of that example the thing we got from it. But by keeping the focus on that, now it's not, well, you're wrong.
Here's the evidence of why I think you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, listen to talk radio. Most people have no clue, and they're adamant about their point of view. Well, if we translate that to the work world, we can have all kinds of mistakes based on what we think, as opposed to taking a breath, going to the 4 problem-solving questions, and figuring out what's really going on.
So how do we, to that point, Mark, and I know we've only got probably 5 minutes left here, but how do we debrief this in a way that gets people to think about how they can use it? What's our summary approach?
The week before, when I assign it, which I give them very little except the benefits of what we're going to do, I tell them to watch meetings for the next week and notice how many times people are talking at each other. And they always come in all kinds of funny stories about that. So in my summary or debrief, I'll get them talking about, so which part was challenging and why? So they start realizing our human nature doesn't tend to do this, which is why it's so powerful. And then, I think I got this from you, part of the debrief is to say, so which piece is most critical? Somebody says, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know somebody else has a different opinion, and then you get them using the tool, debating their points of view. So in a way, I let them debrief it based on that experience. And it is funny when you ask the second person to stand up and state their opinion on it.
You know, they go right back to nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And you coach them through and they do fine.
and the reason that I would do that, and I haven't been to deal in a long time, the reason I would do that is I wanted to try and simulate what a meeting might feel like.
Because all the eyes are on you.
That's where most of the time this is going to get used, and so I wanted to try and simulate that. So yeah, that was one of the ways I got to it. What else have you done?
Ask them where would we see this happen? Where would we see this useful, to bring up real life examples of where they're going to be using this, and what challenges do we find that we may have with this? Well, other people haven't gone through the Dale Carnegie course, so they're pretty on class, kind of a thing. And it brings us, yes, that's a great point. We're only in control of ourselves, so we're going to use the tools that we have in here. And another key factor that I always like to bring out is we have to be intentional and keep doing it and keep using it, because just like I'd like to tie it back to cycle performance, we need to keep doing it and keep using it in order for it to become a behavior that we do. So just I like to tie it back.
Another piece of the debrief is to just ask them. So let's look at our middle set of principles. What parts of that are reflected in this tool?
I've not done
Because if you think about it, the first block there where it's about defuse the conflict, chapter and verse, what we're doing.
Yeah.
The report back on the second set is in 4, 8 week, right?
No, it's in 5. The report back.
Is it 5A?
5B. So you do disagree agreeably, and then we get into
Oh, it's
report
right
back.
after that.
Report back on second set.
Interesting.
Because think about it.
Yeah.
Any of the situations where they avoid the conflict, show respect. You know what I mean? The stuff that's coming up that should be in their heads if they're prepared for part B. This encapsulates. I mean, I've had some people where they said the biggest part of the program was this.
Yes.
Thing.
Yeah.
I have had that too.
Because they got out of their way so much
Always
better.
interesting.
Out of their own way.
And the other thing about this that people have found is feeling more in control, raising that level of confidence in this sense of being in more control, because they have a way to approach a situation where they oftentimes may know it's going to be difficult. The person's going to push back right away.
Diplomacy and tech, they call it, responding instead of reacting. I mean, it's just unique to Dale Carnegie, but that's kind of the idea. You don't feel like you're just shooting a tennis ball back and forth, but you're more in control with your approach. Very cool.
Which time into the drivers.
Yeah. Well, I've stolen a bunch of good stuff out of this, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
And I hope everybody else has too. So if you need any more insight into any of these activities, if you want to talk with Kaylee or Diane or anybody else about yes and, feel free to dive into that. But let us know, because there's a lot of ways we can get this section done. But at the end, if participants really grasp this, it's going to be one of the most useful things they can do. Quick side note, the next Game Changer session will be Wednesday, October 24th. So right before the Dale Carnegie Course Innovation meeting. And in that session, our plan is to cover the different technology tools that our trainers have. Things like Carnegie Connect, how do we access and use that? Where do we find things? Shared folders, trainer referral forms. So we're going to cover a wide range of tech tools. So those of you interested in that, we'd love to see you there on Wednesday the 24th. Otherwise, at noon. Yeah, we'll stick to noon for now. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time.